not a kind of a player who would go into strategically dubious position without having some very concrete idea of his own. Now, Vichy castled, which is of course a most normal move. It should also be mentioned, for the sake of theory here, that queen takes a5, a queen a5 check is another possibility. And here, as after queen d2, the endgame is not very promising for white. After queen d2, king d2, and let's say castling long, followed by d5. Also, the king on d2 is not so well placed and will lose some time. White will have to go c3, and this allows unusual counterplay, beginning with knight f3 check. Queen takes f3, bishop c3 check. And the thing is that although all this is by no means so clear, the developments have shown that white is better in complications, and the detailed analysis of these complications is a bit out of our theme now, which is mainly dealing with strategical side of chess. So we will just leave it for now and see what happened after black castled. So now certainly black has practically finished his development. His minor pieces have all been developed. The bishop on g7 is pretty strong. The rook is also exerting some pressure along the f file, and this temporarily at least, this is black's certain compensation for the long-term weaknesses that white needs some time to develop. But in fact, after bishop e2, white develops pretty swiftly, and here we can remember what we were mentioning a bit earlier, that the knights of black on c6 and e5, they are a bit copying each other. That is, both are controlling more or less the same square on e5. So one of the knights actually would like to go to f4 when possible. But for the moment, the d6 pawn is hanging. That is, after knight g6, bishop d6, or queen d6 would be a possibility. So it is natural to do something about it and then to transfer the knight. So some people have played in this position d5, which looks very normal. Now, black is also controlling some light squares in the center and is ready to move the knight to f4 after white castles. On the other hand, the pawn on d5 gives white additional target after playing c4. That is, after playing c4, now black has to do something. He will either be left with a weak pawn on d5, or will have to go d4, after which, let's say if white just goes knight c2, followed by bishop d3, then the light squares would be irreparably weakened, because now e4 is weak, and e5, e4 will never be possible after bishop d3, bishop e4. So you see that also strategically correct ideas, good plans, they have to be executed with precaution. And in this position, Vichy played queen e7, castles, rook a d8. These moves, which might seem mysterious otherwise, now become clear. Black needs to protect his d6 pawn in order to execute the maneuver knight g6, knight f4, in order to activate the knight. Now, when I saw this position for the first time, I thought that white's advantages are undisputable. He has two bishops, and potentially, after rook e1, also an active position and a long-term play against the king on g8, which lacks decent protection, because many squares are weakened by the pawns on h6 and g5. But when I started to analyze the position, all became less clear, because black's counterplay is extremely efficient. Let's say if white plays rook e1, knight g6, now d2 is hanging, c3, knight f4, let's say bishop f1, d5. Now you see that after d4, all black's pieces will be extremely active. The knight will be coming to d4, the diagonal will be opened, the files for the rooks will be open, and all black's pieces would be extremely efficiently placed for counterplay, and white would not be better at all in this kind of structure. So you see, it is very important to prevent the plan which black has in mind. So after rook a d8, still at home in the opening preparation, I decided that the knight simply should not be allowed to f4, and thus I found the novelty which in fact changed the evaluation of this line. The move which would probably not occur otherwise, I played bishop h5. Now the bishop has little to do on h5, it seems, but it is very important that the maneuver knight g6 f4 is prevented, and black has to look for some other ideas, and this proves remarkably difficult, because now it is difficult to find another use for the knight on e5, because also the transfer knight d7, knight f6 is difficult, because the pawn on d6 will be hanging. So black has to look for new plans, and this is always good to annoy the opponent's plans a bit, if you can. So, and white has long-term advantages, that is the bishop on h5, the bishop on g3, two bishops, and other pieces are reasonably placed. So black is in fact under pressure to show something in return, and in fact this is not so easy. Black plays king h8. The king is a bit more safe on h8 than on g8, and white continues his normal play with rook e1, placing the rook in the center, also putting some pressure on the queen on e7, and now if the knight will be coming, the knight will be going somewhere from e5, there will be possibilities to go to d5 or so with the knight. And now finding no other plan, black plays d5, although d5 is less efficient now because the diagonal g7 b2 is not open, the knight is not on f4 but on e5, so black's counterplay is not that efficient. And now in order to pay still more attention to black's possible play and to take some measures against it, I decided to stop possible expansion on the queen side, because I thought that for black b5, knight c4 might be the idea, to put pressure on b2 and then to be able to recapture on c4 with a pawn, and thought that in fact white's position is so sound and so safe that a move like a4 is a luxury which I can afford, because now after b5, a takes b5, a takes b5, also the white rook would get the open file and will put a lot of pressure either from a1 or from a6, and this is certainly nothing which black wants to allow. So he would rather do something else, but this something else proves remarkably difficult, because now his natural transfer was prevented, and black played knight c4, looking for some counterplay along the d file and the diagonal g7 b2. And attractive as it may have looked, still maybe black had to refrain from this and insisted on executing his general strategic plan, that is play maybe queen f6 and then go knight g6, knight f4. Now this is another point which is important to remember. Mostly it is good to continue with your plans even at cost of something. In this case, having to play queen f6 costs black quite some time, because for instance also after, let's say, rook a3, knight g6, knight g4, white wins some additional time attacking the queen, but it is better to continue your plan even with some unpleasantness, than not being able to show any coherent plan at all, because chess is the game which is based on some strategic action, and you cannot just make moves which are not connected to each other. So in this case it would be very important that black sticks to his plans, even with the loss of some time, and he might then have been able to obtain a reasonable position. He did not do this, and after a4 he played knight c4, and now after knight takes c4, d takes c4, it looks as if black gets a lot of play. The d file is open, the f file is open, now the diagonal, the knight is coming to d4, but a closer look to the position will show us that the position firstly is now more open than before. The diagonal for the bishop from f3 has been opened, and this is basically useful for the side which has two bishops. That is to white's advantage in this case, and also black's structure is more vulnerable than before. Now the pawn on e6 is very weak, because the move e5 at any moment would block the bishop on g7 forever, and thus would be basically unacceptable. The square e4 has now been weakened, and now the idea is like bishop g6 e4 or bishop f3 e4, bringing the bishop to a very strong central square in the air, and also the pawn on c4 will be hanging in many lines. Still, because of black's activity and dynamic possibilities, all these advantages are not easy to use, and how I managed to turn them into a full point against one of the world's best players, we will see in our next lesson.